Okay, gonna do something a little different today. This is the Akumajou Dracula Best Music Collection Box, aka the Castlevania Soundtrack Collection of Doom. Yeah, I'm usually not big into music collections, but I love Castlevania and especially the music, and this was just, I couldn't turn this one down. So, it's an empty box. Yeah, that's just the box. I've already taken the discs out. There's 18 music CDs and 1 DVD, so a total of 19 discs, and a booklet. Get to that in a minute. So, let's do the rundown. The discs are in slim packs, which, word of warning, if you're going to import one of these, when I got my collection, about half the discs had fallen off the spindle. None of them were scratched, thankfully, but if you're sending one of these overseas, you might get some nicks or scratches, which is unfortunate, but how else are you going to fit all those discs in one box? Still though, it's a nice collection. The letters actually spell it Dracula. Alright, so our first disc is the 8-bit old school fun. We have the original Famicom NES version, the MSX2 version, and then we get Simon's Quest. Of course, this is the Japanese collection. It is the FDS version, which uses the FDS FM chip, so it doesn't sound quite exactly the same as the NES version, but I prefer this version anyway. And then we have the arcade version. This is, Haunted Castle, which, well, I'll admit, is a shitty game. I love it. I truly enjoy playing Haunted Castle, and the soundtrack is great. This is the game that created Cross Your Heart, which is one of my favorite Castlevania tracks. It's kind of underrated in my opinion, and it's wonderful to finally have that whole collection on one disc. And it ends with the Castlevania Adventure, the original black and white Game Boy game. So you get some nice, pretty much where everything started. Where it started on the Nintendo, the computer, the arcade, and the Game Boy on that first disc. Alright, disc number 2. We have Castlevania 3. Which is, of course, again, the Japanese cart soundtrack, which is much better. And then, surprisingly, we have Kid Dracula. This is the NES version. You had that weird cutesy spin-off of little young Alucard. That actually made this collection, so you get that. And it concludes with the second black and white Game Boy game. So, more old school stuff. Although it's kind of weird hearing Kid Dracula, because, it's cutesy and happy, and it's a little different from the main series, but still, it's part of the series, nice to have it. Disc 3 is completely the Super Famicom, Super NES, Super Castlevania 4, whatever you want to call it. Great soundtrack, and it's a little more spooky, I guess. I don't know, different tone than most of the games. So it's nice that it gets its own disc, because it's great, but it doesn't mesh so well with, the other games by itself, anyway. Next we get Rondo of Blood, the PC Engine version of Dracula X. Wonderful soundtrack, wonderful game. And interesting, originally they had made a new version of Cross Your Heart from the old arcade game, which they were going to put in the game, but they ended up not using it, but they still included the track on the soundtrack anyway, and this collection thankfully does still have that track, because I love Cross Your Heart, and it's a great remixed version of it. So we got Rondo of Blood, also Vampire Killer, better known as Castlevania Bloodlines, the Genesis Mega Drive game, and it also is a great soundtrack, and it sounds fantastic now that it's, amped up to full CD quality audio, and not, it's still Genesis chip music, but on, CD quality, very high bit rate, good stuff. Moving on, we get to the third and final black and white Game Boy game, the one of Sonia Belmont, and also the Game Boy version of Kid Dracula. From what I remember, the Game Boy version of Kid Dracula isn't that much different from the NES version, but you do get both soundtracks, which is unexpected, but nice. Alright, moving on. Next disc is Symphony of the Night, a favorite from a lot of people. You get the full PlayStation soundtrack, as well as the 2 exclusive as well as the 2 tracks that were exclusive to the Sega Saturn version. So, wonderful game, wonderful soundtrack, and you get all of it on one disc. Okay. Next disc we have the this is a disc that I probably won't be listening to much. This is the Nintendo 64 games, which for Nintendo 64 music it's okay, but they're bad games with questionable soundtrack, and yeah. But it's still there if you actually want to listen to N64 music. I don't even want to imagine anyone playing N64, but there it is. Next disc we're moving on to Game Boy Advance. We've got Circle of the Moon. Great game, great music. And to the right, also on this disc, is the PlayStation Castlevania Chronicles game. Now this is one of the first main gripes with this collection, unfortunately. You know, the original Sharp 68000 game actually had 3 versions of the soundtrack, depending on what hardware you had in the computer. And in the PlayStation version, they were all included, as well as the new remix, specifically for the PlayStation version. This collection only has the PlayStation remix on this disc. It does not have any of the original Sharp X68000 versions, which is unfortunate. I mean, I love the PlayStation remix. It is a great remix, but it's kind of a shame that the originals still weren't in there, especially in a collection of this magnitude. Alright, moving on. Next disc we have the second and the third Game Boy Advance games. The Harmony of Dissonance and, I don't know, was it Aria of Sorrow, I think? The one with the stupid, pasty white, pretty boy. Good game, but dumbass character. Anyway, moving on, next disc is just Castlevania. This is actually the PS2 game, Lament of Innocence. In Japan, it was just simply called Castlevania. No subtitle, nothing. Just Castlevania in English. I really enjoyed playing this game, actually. It's not the best Castlevania game, but I liked it, and the music's great. Nice to have that. Alright, next disc, we have the... This is the first of the DS games in Dawn of Sorrow. The second game with the pasty white freak boy that... I really hope they never make any more games with him, because he's stupid. But anyway, still a good game, and that's the soundtrack. Next disc is the second PS2 game, the one with the Devil Forger guy, which I actually haven't played this game yet. I keep meaning to pick up a copy, because it's incredibly cheap. But I still haven't, but it does have the soundtrack for that. Moving on to disc. The next one. After Dracula, it spells out Simon, actually, which is why we got M. Because it's actually in Japanese, it's actually Simon with 2 M's. But, yeah, that's another story. Next disc, we get Gallery of Labyrinths, aka Portrait of Ruin. In my opinion, the first, that was a good game. I enjoyed playing that one on DS. And great soundtrack, too, and the whole thing. Next up, we have... Dracula X Chronicle. This is the remixed music for the, the 3D remake of Rondo of Blood on PSP. So you get both the original PC Engine version as well as the new 3D PSP version, which, in my opinion, the 3D version looks like shit. But I do like the music, so I will stick to my PC Engine original. Alright, next we have Order of Ecclesia, the final DS game. I really enjoyed playing that one, except for I had a few weird balancing issues. It was either way too hard or way too easy, depending on what you did. But, good game, good soundtrack, and it gets disc as well. Next we've got... this is Castlevania Judgment. That shitty Wii game. But, it shouldn't surprise you, really. Most Wii games are shit. Yeah, I don't like the Wii. I'll never buy one. It's a piece of crap. And yes, I have played it. If you want to flame me for it, go ahead, but it's a shitty system. Judgment is a shitty game. I have played it a few times, and yeah, it's shitty. But, it does have a kind of an interesting techno soundtrack. And you get Judgment. Next up is one of probably the best discs in this collection. because this was not released in any form other than this collection. And this is the 2009 arcade game. In 2009, they released a new Castlevania arcade game, which is basically a light gun shooter, except you have a whip controller, and you slash back and forth, so you don't really, shoot things in the middle. You actually whip back and forth. And the arcade game, I think, was kind of a failure, but it is an incredible soundtrack. Probably the best version of a lot of the old classic songs. Seriously, this disc shocked the hell out of me. It is fucking amazing. And I'm happy I bought this whole set just for this one disc, because this is the only way this was released, and it sounds incredible. Someone has already uploaded all of the tracks up to YouTube, and I highly recommend listening to them if you like Castlevania, because they are amazing. But of course on YouTube they still don't sound anywhere near as nice as the real disc, so very, very impressed with this disc. I'm glad to have it. It also includes Castlevania the Metal, which is actually a pachinko machine. So yes, you get the pachinko machine sound effects. Kind of stupid extra, but I want to be complete. Alright, and then next we get the... Alright, this is a disc that sparked a lot of controversy in this collection. And because of that, you can actually get this collection kind of cheap, in Japan anyway, from people selling it used. This is a special disc of the autobiographical music of Yamane Michiru, who's one of the more famous Castlevania composers. Anyway, there's a lot of vocal tracks on this disc. Now, it's a controversy because the original version of her autobiographical music was 48 tracks. Among this collection and the DVD, there are only 23. So there were people that bought this because that CD is incredibly rare, hoping to get the full thing. But unfortunately, you basically only get half of it. So, personally, I'm not that hardcore. I just like the games and the game music, so I'm not so upset. But some people really were upset about that and sold off their boxes already. Then you get the DVD. Again, this is Yamane Michiru. She has an interview as well as a recording studio vid and a live video, so you can watch her play some of her music live, which is nice. It's an extra. Okay, let's take a look at the book. The book is basically a recap of pretty much the entire Castlevania series. Just about every game gets a entry, and it's got nice art of Drac and Simon. Kind of makes Simon look like Jesus. Very gothic. Good stuff. Now, if you were paying attention, you probably may have picked up that, there was a game that I didn't mention. And that, of course, is the Castlevania Dracula, Akumajou Dracula X, aka Castlevania Dracula X, the second Super NES game. That is not included in this collection. And it is actually a big negative for me, because honestly, it's a terrible game. It controls like crap. The collision boxes are crap. It's a bad, bad game. But it would have been nice to have it included because it did have a great soundtrack. I love the soundtrack. And to add insult to injury, it's actually in the book. They actually have an entry for X, but the music isn't in it. And the book doesn't have the 2009 arcade game. So you get the arcade music, but not an entry in the book. The book ends with Judgment. But you get X in the book, but you don't get the X soundtrack. Overall, though, it's still a great collection, and it's a lot of music for what it costs. And you can get it fairly cheap in Japan, at least, if you look around. But it is a limited edition, so if you're importing, you're going to have to spend a lot. But if you like Castlevania, it's good stuff. Hope you enjoyed it.